Origins of Lady Deathstrike. Yuriko Oyama is the daughter of Kenji Oyama, who was a former Japanese kamikaze pilot during the World War, where his face was horribly scarred during a failed suicide attempt on an American battleship. Kenji became a Japanese crime lord, and the head of the Oyama Heavy Industries had sent Yuriko and her two brothers to be privately tutored by Marcy Stryker, the wife of the soldier William Stryker. Kenji felt deeply ashamed of himself for failing his country, so decided to scar Yuriko and her brothers' faces in a ritual design. He eventually became the criminal scientist known as Lord Darkwind, and he developed the process of which enabled adamantium to be bonded to human bone, in an attempt to create super soldiers for Japan. However, his notes were stolen from him, and it took him many years to rediscover the process. Cyborg Assassin. As the samurai warrior Lady Deathstrike, Oyama attempted to kill Wolverine and take his skeleton. However, she was defeated by Wolverine's friend Heather Hudson in her costumed identity of Vindicator. Subsequently, Lady Deathstrike was converted into a cyborg by the extra-dimensional being Spiral. In this new form, Lady Deathstrike's own skeleton has been reinforced with adamantium. Although Lady Deathstrike heads Oyama Heavy Industries, she also works as a professional assassin. For a time she was a member of the Reavers, Donald Pierce's team of cyborgs. She severed the legs of Japanese hero Sunfire. Wolverine remains her principal adversary. Lord Darkwind grew to despise Japanese civilization, so he brought an assassin Bullseye to his island, which was located off the Japanese coast. Bullseye was crippled at the time, so Lord Darkwind replaced some of his bones with adamantium in hopes that Bullseye in return would assassinate the Japanese Prime Minister. Traveling in Japan in hopes of capturing Bullseye, Daredevil encountered Yuriko, who sought out to set vengeance upon her father for the scarring of her face and the deaths of her brothers, who died on the battlefield under the service of her father. Also, the man she loved, Kira, served her father in his private army, and she did not want her father to cause him to come to harm. Yuriko teamed up with Daredevil, and together they sought out Kenji's private island. Just as Bullseye escaped and Kenji was about to kill Daredevil, Yukio murdered her father. Due to the death of her father, her lover decided to commit seppuku and honor killing in respect of his dead master. The death of Kira altered Yuriko's outlook on her life, and she decided to embrace her father's work and sought out everyone who had ever dishonored him in any way. Yuriko blamed Wolverine for the theft of her father's research and believed that Wolverine got his adamantium-coated skeleton through the use of the research. She trained as a samurai and called herself Lady Deathstrike and led a group of her father's warriors to Canada to find and retrieve Wolverine's skeleton for study. She was defeated, however, when Wolverine was aided by Vindicator and the superhero team, Alpha Flight. Angry at her failure to defeat Wolverine, Deathstrike struck a deal with Donald Pierce, the White King of the organization known as the Hellfire Club. Donald had formed his own group of cyborg mercenaries called the Reavers, and Deathstrike wished to join them. Donald had the extra-dimensional being called Spiral take Yuriko to the Mojoverse, where she received cybernetic implants which included a healing factor that healed her scars and gave her adamantium bones and talons. Yuriko led 3 other cyborgs, Cole, Macon, and Reese, to attack Wolverine and the X-Men, only to be defeated yet again. Seeking only vengeance, Deathstrike joined up again with Pierce and the Reavers in ambushing Wolverine in a town in the Australian outback. The Reavers captured Wolverine and crucified him on a X-shaped cross and left him to die. However, Wolverine is freed by the young Jubilee, and the two clash with the Reavers briefly before escaping. Muir Island Saga. Deathstrike and the Reavers believed that Wolverine had escaped to the mutant research facility on Muir Island, so they located and attacked him again. They clashed with both the X-Men and the government team, Freedom Force, and after suffering many casualties, the Reavers decided to retreat. After the failed attempts of killing Wolverine, Yuriko decided to go on her own, and with the help of Gateway, she teleported to his location. At the moment that Yuriko teleported, Wolverine had traveled back in time in 1937 to Spain, so Deathstrike was also sent in the past as well. The pair were caught in the skirmish during the Spanish Civil War and fought their way through a temporal distortion to return to the past, which left their battle unresolved. Fatal attractions. After Wolverine's adamantium skeleton was forcibly removed by the villain Magneto, Deathstrike lost interest in her quest to kill Wolverine, so she returned to the Reavers in search for her purpose. However, the Reavers were attacked by robotic sentinels who were summoned by the time-traveling villain, Trevor Fitzroy. Most of the original members were killed, but Donald managed to rebuild the group and led them in capturing Milo Thurman, who possessed powerful abilities. Donald attempted to transform Milo into a cyborg under his control, but his plan was thwarted by Milo's former lover, Domino. Deathstrike battled Domino before the Reavers' base was destroyed. Extreme X-Men. After the X2, X-Men United movie was released, Lady Deathstrike reappeared in comics as an ally of William Stryker in the Extreme X-Men story arc entitled God Loves, Man Kills 2. During this story arc, Deathstrike displays new abilities she has never displayed before, in which she was able to connect to the computer and internet with her cybernetics. Later, Deathstrike would mutilate and almost kill Sunfire, in which he had Rogue absorb his powers to battle Lady Deathstrike. She disappears after the fight was over. Civil War. After the Civil War, Lady Deathstrike has appeared to have registered herself with the United States government and joined one of the government teams, New Thunderbolts. She is currently working alongside Venom, Bullseye, Jack-o'-lantern, Songbird, and Jester. They all participated on the final battle in Times Square, New York, and after the war is over they incarcerated back in the Negative Zone prison. Messiah Complex. She was seen in the Messiah Complex storyline, leading the Reavers. She have allied herself with the Purifiers. She and the Reavers faced the new X-Men, where she wounded Hellion but was defeated by X-23 and Rockslide. Yuriko appeared again and is in pursuit of Cable and the mutant newborn, but faced of the new X-Force, and X-23 seemingly killed the cybernetic woman by cutting one of her cybernetic arms faster than it can repair and slicing through the older woman's body faster than she can heal. Laura then proceeds to tell her, "You were dead the moment you touched Julian Keller." Sisterhood of Mutants. Lady Deathstrike and Spiral were recruited by the Red Queen Madeline Pryor to join her Sisterhood of Mutants. She helped steal Quannon's corpse and fought Domino in a Tokyo cemetery, before opposing Wolverine during an assault on Greymalkin. After the demise of the Red Queen, she escaped with Spiral and the remaining members of the Sisterhood. Uncanny X-Force. Lady Deathstrike is currently leading the Reavers and planning an attack on Utopia. Gateway has tipped Deadpool off to this, so X-Force heads to Australia to stop her. At a nearby bar, Yuriko is prepping the Reavers for battle with Wolverine. Once X-Force arrives, a suicide bomber takes out Deadpool, Wolverine, and Phantom X. Lady Deathstrike waits over Wolverine's body for him to wake up. She slices him methodically, taking out his sense of smell, his eyes, and throat. However, she winds up being doused in kerosene. Wolverine fires a Taser at her, which ignites her in flames. Yuriko is able to upload her consciousness into a computer before her body dies. Death of Wolverine. Lady Deathstrike appears in Madripoor and fights Wolverine at the request of Viper. However, Wolverine is saved by Kitty Pryde, who defeats Deathstrike. Powers and abilities. Lady Deathstrike is a cyborg with superhuman strength, speed, and agility. Deathstrike's skeleton has been infused with adamantium, rendering her skeletal structure practically unbreakable. She is able to lift 1 ton. Her speed, agility, and reflexes are above those of the finest human athletes. Her stamina is also superhuman. She can exert herself at peak capacity for several hours before feeling fatigue. Initially, it was a mystery as to how she survived this process, as it is generally believed that without a healing factor, the process would be fatal to a human. It was later revealed how Spiral used magic to infuse the metal into Deathstrike's body. It is unlikely that Deathstrike could have survived the process on her own. Deathstrike's fingers have been replaced by 12-inch adamantium claws. She is an expertly trained assassin and is highly skilled in a variety of Oriental martial arts. Although Yuriko prefers stealth and subtlety in her killings, she is emotionally disturbed and this interferes with her effectiveness. Her last visit with Donald Pierce, leader of a team of cyborg criminals known as the Reavers, resulted in an upgrade that provided her with a kind of cybernetic healing factor which functions in ways similar to Wolverine's, though not as efficient. The factor heals damages to both her cybernetic and organic parts within minutes. More extensive damages are slower to be repaired.